Part 5. After Jericho just barely survives at the Bash, Kofi had the match won against CM Punk, but Jericho whacked Kofi with the championship belt and pinned Punk himself. He escaped with the championship belt, and now the next night on Raw, Jericho delivers a victory promo. He said, "I've put Roddy Piper in the hospital and I've still survived with the WWE Championship. Richie Steamboat is just the worst general manager ever, and yet I'm still the champion. He doesn't want me to be the champion, and yet I'm still the champion. I'm just the best thing in the world." And then he invites out the SmackDown Superstars again to join in his celebrations, but they don't come out. They don't come out, and then CM Punk appears on the Titantron and he says, "You pinned me. You pinned me, and that clearly tells me that you don't care about SmackDown and you don't care about us unless that we keep you champion. If you're a champion, that's all you care about. That's all we're here for. We're not coming out there, and we're not helping you anymore." And Steamboat uses this as an opportunity, and this is another sign that he is starting to get a clue, that he's starting to grow some balls, because then he announces Jericho versus Kingston. We're going to try this on Raw for the third time we've had this on Raw, and it's going to be a lumberjack match with Raw and SmackDown Superstars. The SmackDown Superstars that are no longer on Jericho's side, and the Raw Superstars that only some of them are. So it's basically a very mixed lumberjack setting. And we have that match, and for the third time, it's a no contest finish. Both guys end up outside the ring. They're getting assaulted on. That's the end of that show. The third time we've tried to have Kofi versus Jericho on Raw, it's been a no contest finish, and that's the end of that Raw. Just a brawl. Jericho getting beat down by guys on the outside. So is Kofi. That's the end of that Raw. The next week on Raw, Steamboat is very upset. That's the third time we've had Jericho versus Kofi that ended in such a disgusting manner. I'm sick of SmackDown people being here. This is not going to stand anymore. He sounds more assertive than he's ever been before, and he says to CM Punk, "I will face you in this ring tonight, and if I win, you and your SmackDown buddies go back to where you belong and never come back. If you win, I will give you one more chance to take the WWE Championship. I will put you in the match at Night of Champions with Kofi and Jericho. If you win, you'll get one more chance to take Raw's Championship away from the show." Punk agrees to this, and we have Steamboat versus Punk, and Punk wins dirtily. He's still a heel. He's not with Jericho anymore, but he's still a heel, and he wins via dirty tactics. And that's that Raw. That's that Raw. How that ends. Punk wins via dirty method. He's still a heel. He's just not with Jericho anymore. So it's kind of like now we have Steamboat dealing with two sides of the same coin. You know, things are just getting worse. The next week is the last week before Night of Champions, and Steamboat says, "Okay, however he did it, Punk did pin me. He's in the championship match, and I have to live with that." So at Night of Champions right now, it's once again, like at the Bash, Jericho versus Kofi versus Punk for the WWE Championship, and that's the way it appears to say. But just as that is supposed to be finishing, Steamboat is delivering his promo, and then Piper appears. Piper, who has been hospitalized since before the Bash, is now back. He says, "Look, kid, you've learned you know what you have to do. You know that you cannot let that stand. You have to put yourself in this match. You have to make this a fatal four-way match. You have to put yourself in this match. You have to make it Steamboat, Jericho, Kofi, and Punk." Steamboat is unwilling to do this. No matter how hard Piper may be on him, no matter how many profanities Piper can say, no matter how hard Piper tries, Steamboat just cannot bring himself to make that bold move. So what does it take? Steamboat Senior, Steamboat's dad, Ricky Steamboat comes out, and he is the decisive factor in making that decision. So Steamboat Senior and Piper just both kind of convince the young buck to say, "Put yourself in the match," and Steamboat does that. It's now a fatal four-way match. Richie Steamboat versus Kofi Kingston versus CM Punk versus Chris Jericho for the WWE Championship at Night of Champions. Night of Champions happens, the Fatal 4-Way happens. The end of the match, CM Punk is later on the outside. Jericho is there ready to be pinned, and Steamboat and Kofi are both up. Steamboat stands aside and lets Kofi win. Kofi wins, he pins Jericho, and Kofi is your new WWE Champion. And Steamboat has stood aside and let that happen. And that's how Jericho loses the championship. The next week, the next night on Raw, Jericho immediately invokes his rematch clause and, rips into Steamboat in a promo saying, that was bullshit. You just stepped aside and let him win. That's not how that match was supposed to go. That's not how you're supposed to handle yourself in a match. That should not have happened. I'm invoking my rematch clause tonight, and this is just another bit of your bullshit. And Steamboat, he's definitely growing more assertive as time goes on, but he's in agreement to a degree. He's like, okay, you're right. I did step aside. I did let Kofi win, and you can have your rematch tonight. But if you lose, that's it. You have to stop being so unreasonable. And Jericho does lose. Jericho does lose cleanly to Kofi. Kofi retains the championship, and then that's the closing end of that show. The night after Night of Champions, that Raw is over with Kofi beating Jericho in a rematch for the championship. So Kofi is still the champion. And then the week after that, probably the most emotional promo of this story. Jericho just pretty much marshals the entire Raw locker room. Everyone who agrees with him that this Steamboat being general manager thing has just been a flop. It's been a failure. It needs to end. And Steamboat is just put up on the deep end. This is everything he ever had nightmares about. Jericho at the helm, all these superstars glaring at him. Jericho just saying, you put your tail between your legs, you go home, and you realize this is not where you're supposed to be. You're just a kid. This is not where you're supposed to be. Get the hell out and don't come back until you grow some balls. And just Steamboat just completely wilts and dies and has a breakdown and just kind of slumps with his head hung up the rampway. He tries to get consoled by some Raw superstars along the way. Some superstars that still are loyal to him, but it doesn't work. He just slinks away, and it looks like the end of Ricky Steamboat. It looks like the end of Ricky Steamboat, and things look pretty bleak. Then we have and that's the end of that Raw. Then the next Raw, the last one before SummerSlam, Vince McMahon comes out. Vince McMahon comes out and says Steamboat did not show up for work this night. He's supposed to come and manage this show, and he did not come. And that's a failure. That's a legitimate reason to remove him. I cannot fire him unless I have a reason, and now I have a reason. If he does not show up for work by the end of this broadcast, he will be removed as general manager, and Kofi will forfeit the title back to Chris Jericho. That's what's going to happen. So that's the ending promo. Jericho is waiting for Steamboat. Is he going to show up? Is he going to show up? It doesn't look like he's going to show. He doesn't look like he's going to show up. So Jericho demands to be given back the title. Steamboat does show up. There's a huge pop. There's a huge gratification. There's just a huge fanfare for Steamboat for showing up and saving the world from apocalypse. Jericho was going to get back the title handed to him. Steamboat was going to be removed as GM. Vince was going to appoint a new GM. This is all saved because Steamboat came back. It's wonderful. It's great. Then Steamboat, he says in his just strongest voice yet, at SummerSlam, it's Steamboat versus Jericho. And that's the match. And that's the match. That is the payoff, because at SummerSlam, they steal the show. It's Steamboat's best match yet, and Steamboat wins cleanly. And there is your gratification. There is your payoff. Steamboat. Now, I could imagine that after this SummerSlam match, Steamboat would probably step down as GM. He'd probably say, after that match with Jericho at SummerSlam, I realised, even though Jericho put me through hell, even though myself and Jericho have been just, I wish it never happened, it was horrible, I love being in the ring with him. That's what I want to be. I'm a performer at heart. I'm going to be general. I'm not going to be general manager anymore. I'm just going to be a performer. And they'll probably have some rematches, but that is the main payoff. Him winning at SummerSlam is the main payoff, and I think that after he kind of just transitions into being a performer and just finishes off the loose ends, ties up the loose ends with Jericho. There you have an upper card main event guy. Like he could be built towards a championship match after that is over. I just didn't give him the championship here because I didn't think it felt right. I felt like I took the belt off Jericho and I gave it to Kofi, and then I had the SummerSlam payoff with Steamboat against Jericho. Steamboat won. He won the big match, but he didn't win the title until he was definitely ready. And I think after Jericho has put him over in this fashion, he would be ready. And that is my booking challenge. If I have anything further to say.